Hello, hello, and welcome to CatalystMLM. I'm Brian Switchko, and today on the show we have Tom Ziglar. Tom is a husband, father, speaker, and golfer, and for some of you, his last name, Ziglar, might sound very familiar. That's because he is the son of legendary Zig Ziglar. He is the CEO of Ziglar Inc. and co-authored the book Born to Win with his father. Thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, Brian, great to be here.
So your dad is a really cool dude. He definitely, through his lifetime, helped to inspire countless people. I mean, because it cheered out. And a lot of very, very successful people, which we'll get into in a bit, point back to a place in their lives and their careers where something that he said, content that he wrote, really just changed the direction of their life and their business. But my biggest question for you is, what was it like for you growing up with that? When it was 24/7, just everything good? What was that like? All that good passionness.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, being Dad's son, I didn't know anything else, so I didn't know any better. But the interesting thing is that at home he was pretty quiet. I mean, he was intense, but he wasn't the motivational, yay, let's make it happen.
Let's go for dinner.
Yeah, but he always taught, and he believed 100%, that one of the things we had control of was our own attitude. And I can remember as a young boy, here's just a little example. You know, young boy, of course, I grew up going to church, and I'm like 12 years old. Dad wakes me up Sunday morning and says, son, it's time to get up. We're going to church. And I said, do I have to go to church? And he looked at me and he said, no, you get to go to church.
I love that. I'm using that when I have kids.
And so the whole idea is that he just let us know, hey, the life is hard. You know, things are going to happen. And a lot of times we have no control, right? You know, I mean, that's one of the things about network marketing that I love, is that we do have control over who we work with and so on. And if somebody says, I don't want you working anymore, that's great. You know, I can go over here. But we do have control how we respond to that.
Yeah.
So Dad was totally consistent in all that he did. And I couldn't imagine a better father than he was. He passed away a little over a year ago. And, you know, that was a hard time, but he was such a blessing, and he reached his ultimate goal, which was to see you at the top. So he's at the top now.
That's amazing. And I know that when he did pass away, there was such a response from just the internet. I mean, and everyone across every social network. I mean, that's all you saw. I think it was trending on Twitter. And it was interesting because President Obama had a quote when Steve Jobs died saying that, you've made a change in the world when everybody's talking about your passing from a device that you created. And I think for Zig, when everybody was sharing all these insights that changed their lives, and you know, how they weren't just saying, I'm sad to see you go, you know, they're saying, this is how I connected with you when you were alive, and how I will continue to connect with you. And it's powerful.
When we made the announcement on Facebook, we had 13,000 comments.
Wow.
And these comments weren't just like rest in peace. Some of them were, but most of them were like, you know, the first time I heard Zig was 1984. It was an Amway convention or whatever it was. And they would tell it was like paragraphs long. 13,000 of those.
Yeah. And and I've thankfully experienced that once in my own life. And it's kind of hard to be sad overall when you see how much the person that you love touched other people. And he really did truly carry on his legacy. I mean, that was his end goal.
Yeah, Dad's joy was teaching and equipping people wherever they were to realize they could be more, do more, and have more, and then watching them achieve more than they thought possible. Yeah. That was his joy and satisfaction. So if that's your legacy, that's pretty cool, because now when you think about it, now there are literally thousands and thousands of people who are passing that on.
Yeah. And will be forever.
That's the ultimate compliment.
Yeah. And you said more, achieve more, have more. A lot of people look at that in kind of an interesting way. And I'm going to kind of backtrack to ask the question, is that a good friend of mine is a performer, and he once said to me, he said that when people go on stage, you know, performers and speakers, they're typically an amplified version of themselves. And so a lot of performers who are very public, when they're off stage, they're very quiet. And so it's interesting to hear that when you said that about your dad. But the other thing that I've also heard, which I've always loved this quote, is that money only amplifies your personality. And a lot of people see money in a very negative light. They think that it's not a very good thing to pursue. And you talk about more, it could be more money, it could be more anything. How do those two kind of connect for you?
Well, Dad said this, one of his famous quotes he said is that money's not the most important thing, but it is relatively close to oxygen.
I love that one.
Right? So one day we're posting on our Facebook page and we put that quote up, and this lady comes on and she does a rant, right? She says, "Oh, I knew this Zig Ziglar was all about the money." Well, before we even saw it, we had 50 other fans, kind of shout her down and set her straight. Well, to her credit, she came back on the site and she wrote another comment. "I apologize. I looked at all of Zig's philosophy and what he's done, and I understand that, money is not the most important thing." What Dad said is, I like the things that money will buy, but I love the things that money won't buy."
Oh.
Okay? And so we need to make sure that we love things that can love us back, because money and things can't love us back, right? So being the kind of nerd guy and behind the scenes guy, I wanted to know what that lady's Facebook page is. So the one who wrote that thing. So I go to her page, and at the top of her page, the last post that she'd made, it was her greatest joy was helping others who couldn't help themselves.
And that was
awesome.
That was after she posted the second comment?
No, this was before.
Okay.
This was like on her own Facebook page.
Yeah.
And so the thought hit me, if we don't have the resources to help somebody who can't help themselves, how can we do that? Now, wait a second. My niece and her husband, they're missionaries. And financially, it's, they're out on faith and people are supporting them, but they are helping other people in ways that we can't imagine. The rest of us, most of us, if we're going to help somebody else, it's because we're being productive and successful at what we're doing, and we have the means and the extra to give to them. So that was Dad's perspective. Is money is just a scorecard. It's just a way of knowing whether we're serving somebody else. Yeah. If we serve somebody else well, then we get rewarded, and then we can use that to take care of our needs and help others who have needs as well.
Yeah, and that's a great way to look at it. And I think not enough people look at it as a resource. And I think that knowing how to use the resource, which, as you just described it, is amazingly powerful. And so, I mean, one of the things that I kind of caught my eye on your website actually was it was a bio for you. And the one sentence, honestly, out of the whole page that I was just like, was that it said, Tom not only shares a name with his father, but a philosophy. And so how would you say that your philosophy, I mean, I don't know of anyone else that connects as much as you do with your dad.
Right.
How is that for you? I mean, so many people are like, I love my dad and we go fishing together, but you just seem to connect on every level. Was there anything that you don't connect on?
No, we were pretty much on the same page all the way from start to finish. And, Dad's core philosophy, and the reason it's such a powerful philosophy is it just makes sense, is he said, you can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want.
I was going to bring that up. That is by far one of my favorites.
I mean, that is such a quote, but it's more than that. It's the golden rule. It's a philosophy. It's a way of life. And the motives behind it have to be pure. You have to be doing it for other people's reasons. Well, 213 comes to an end, right? And I'm at home and I'm in here I've got it right here. We have a performance planner that we use. We've got a new version of this, but this is where we put all our goals and all the things that we want to do. And I asked myself a question that I've never asked myself before. And that question was, what could I see myself doing the rest of my life? Right? And so you better be spot on, or you better give yourself some leeway as to some flexibility and so on. And so I started writing that down, and I came up with my personal mission. So my personal mission is to help others become significant by equipping them to help others become significant.
Yep. Yeah. And you talk about significance, and I know that's and I'll skip ahead, is that's something that you talked about before, is that you talk about the journey from the journey through life from survival to stability, from stability to success, and from success to significance.
Right.
And so what is your definition of that? Because I have a deeper question to ask after you answer that one.
Okay. So let me just approach it from the first part. Survival, and I'm talking about a first world survival. I'm not talking about food and shelter and clothing, right? I'm talking about, for those of us who live in the United States or Europe or a lot of the industrialized world, you're in survival mode until you determine who you want to become. If you don't know who you want to be, that means everybody else is telling you who you are and what you should do. Right? That means you're just wandering from circumstance to circumstance.
Yeah.
So once you determine who you want to become, who you want to be, then I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
I don't know how to make that go away. It's just going to have to ring. So once you determine who you want to become, what you want to do, and you set a plan in place, that moves you from survival to stability.
Yep.
Okay? Now, stability means that you're understanding who you want to become. Well, then you put the game plan in place to become that person. You start doing the things that you need to do to become that person. That moves you to success. Yeah. So survival, you don't know who you want to be. Stability, you determine who you want to be. Success means you're actively working on becoming that person. Mm-hmm. And Simon Sinek, are you familiar with Simon?
Very much so.
And, I think he calls it the golden circle, and the why's in the middle. Yep. A why company versus a what company.
Yeah.
Right. And so the example he used, I'll just use it because it's the easiest. A number of years ago when the MP3 player came out, Dell made an MP3 player. And they asked their customers what they wanted. And they said, we want something inexpensive, reliable, fits in their pocket, holds all our music. Apple, they asked a different question. They said, who do you want to become? And they said trendsetter, leading edge, it's kind of a lifestyle, a mindset of we're the innovators and creatives. And so they came out with the iPod. So I don't think Dell is even in that business anymore.
No, they aren't.
Right? And so how do you move to significance? Significance simply means that you ask the people who you're around, your family, your customers, those you love, your spouse, your friends, you ask them, who do you want to become? And then you help them become that person.
Yeah.
So when you're significant, you help somebody achieve more than they ever thought possible by helping them become the type of person they wanted to become.
That's amazing. And it's I love that, because you talk about, I guess it's more of a development process, right? So you're developing yourself as a person. But so many people think the term success, at least I'll focus on that of the four, involves money, and that money is the only way to measure success. And you talked about, scorecard. That's kind of how people, I think, see it. But becoming a better person, and I'm actually was going to link it below, and the Catalyst community knows that they can get all the resources we talk about in the links below. But you had a video about the, I forget what you call it, but it was the bicycle.
Right.
And it has all those pieces to it. And I'm going to link it below because I think it's a very visual thing, but kind of showing how everything works together is that if you develop yourself as a person, that it enables you to get wherever you want to go. And, a bicycle is used on a journey. You go from A to B, or if it's for fun or whatever, you go somewhere. And I've always heard of these things, and I think you and Zig have both explained it as a journey. And everybody has their own journey. It could be to different places, it could be different things, but they go from one place to another. And everybody is at a different point in that journey. So how should someone's progress in their personal journey affect the actions of a person who's looking to help them?
Okay. I might ask you to rephrase that again. Here's like an opposite way to look at it.
Okay.
Have you seen people who win lotteries?
Yep.
And how many of them still have that money 1 or 2 years later?
Nearly none.
None, right. They actually did another study on paraplegics and quadriplegics a year or 2 years after their injury, and they're actually happier as a group of people than lottery winners. It's crazy. But
Yeah.
you see, when you're injured like that, you have these very short-term goals of, this week I'm going to learn how to button my top button, right? Or this week I'm going to do this, comb my hair. And they see steady progression, they see steady improvement, and they get satisfaction and joy out of that. Lottery winners, it's just the opposite. Everybody's trying to take from them, right? And so, but there's people who make a lot of money and they keep it and they do great things with it. But here's what happens. You see, the character has to come before the money.
Yeah.
Right? If you're not the right kind of person, giving the wrong person money is just a recipe for disaster. And so when you're working with somebody who's trying to climb that mountain, moving from survival to significance, if we focus on the money, then if they get it quickly, they have an artificial sense of what success is. Yep. And if it goes away, then they're devastated. But if we work on, hey, let's do all the right things, become the right kind of person, and the money will follow, then they realize that even if that business or opportunity they thought they have doesn't turn out to be the right one, they can take who they are and go anywhere and be successful. I heard a great quote. I need to find out who said this, but basically they said this. They said, you cannot determine your future, but you can determine your habits, and your habits will determine your future.
Yep. I love that.
So that's pretty cool, right? So we can't, we don't know what's going to happen a year from now. But if we start working on all the habits that put us in a position to win, a year from now, we're going to be winning a lot more than we are today.
Absolutely. And it's the, I guess, sporting equivalent of, having a better vehicle. If you're talking about racing of some kind, if you keep building a better vehicle and a better vehicle, then you're able to win more races regardless of where those races are or who you're racing against. You build a better you.
Right.
And so you talk about a mountain and going from survival to significance. So if you're trying to help someone else, because you do this on a regular basis and, you're trying to help others, how do you phrase that? Do they need to know that they're climbing a mountain and that they're about to go through this process, this effort that, will never end because they're going to continue to build themselves? And do you put something at the top to say, when you get here, you'll get this? Do you find that people who are focused on the process succeed more, or the people who focus on the end succeed more? Like, what is your experience with helping others to actually achieve that success?
Right. Well, the answer is both. People who, you really have to focus on the process and the end. And here's what we say. One of my good friends, Howard Partridge, has this quote, and it says, your business exists for one reason and one reason only, as a vehicle to help you achieve your life goals. Okay? So what you do, whether it's your career or your business, whatever you do, the only reason you do it is it's a vehicle to help you achieve your life goal. And that's what that bicycle diagram is all about, the metaphor. Right. And so in the United States, Gallup just did a study, and 70% of the workforce are disengaged. 52% are disengaged. And what does that mean? It means that they don't really care. They leave right at 5 o'clock. If there's extra work to be done, they don't do it. And then there's 18% of the workforce is actively disengaged. So what that means is whatever the boss says, they undermine it.
Wow.
They're torpedoing the ideas. So picture a bike with 10 bicycle seats on it.
Yeah.
In the average company in the United States, you got 3 seats where they're pedaling like crazy.
Yep.
Right? You got 5 seats where they're coasting, That's the disengaged.
Just dead weight.
And then you got 2 seats at the end where they're dragging their feet and deploying parachutes. Right? They're trying to torpedo the mission.
That's crazy, because when it sounds 17% doesn't sound too threatening, but when you picture it that way, it's like one person makes a massive impact.
Right. It's huge. And so what does all that mean? Well, it means that 30% are actually engaged. Mm-hmm. So what's an engaged person? Somebody who cares, somebody who brings solutions to the meeting, somebody who'll help a team member out. And so the question then is, how do we get people to be engaged?
Yep.
And this is where leadership comes. And Dad had this quote. It wasn't his originally, but he added 2 words to it. The quote was, people don't care how much you know until you know how much you care.
Yep.
And then he added those two words at the end, about them. So if you're building an organization, a team, if you're working in a company, whatever your situation is,
Yep.
the way you show somebody that you care is you care about them. What are your dreams? Where do you want to go on vacation? Where do you want to be in 3 years? You know, what are your kids' names? What did you do for Christmas?
Yeah.
It's not how much did you sell today and da 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 da. It's this personal relationship. And so engagement comes when you put these two magic things together. A leader or a manager who cares about that individual and a dream, right? Because I may not go to work for you, but I'll sure bet you I'll work for my dream.
Right. And you
Right?
can, and there can be a lot of dreams within one dream. I mean, if you use the bicycle metaphor again, if 10 people are on the bike, if one person is dreaming that they're going to go to the beach and the other person is dreaming for a picnic and the other person is dreaming to go play Frisbee, well, you can do all of that in the same place.
Right.
And so, motivating people and it's, I think communication is one of the biggest things that is lacking in a lot of situations. And so communicating how we all win when this happens. When we work together, we all win in this way. And the style of communication is going to be different for every person on the bike.
Right. Absolutely. And this is how it kind of works together as a team. Being down in Texas, we like to go to the shooting range. And let's say you got a rifle
here in Vermont too.
Yeah. So you know this. When you have a rifle, you got a front sight and you got a rear sight, right? And if you only look through one of those, you'll never hit the target.
Yep.
Right? You got to line them up. And when you line them up, then you'll hit the target. And so think of it this way. The front sight is the company's dreams, which they just happen to call revenue goals, growth goals, profit goals, whatever. And the back sight is your personal dream, retirement fund, college education fund, dream house, 3-week vacation, whatever it is. And so your job is to line those two things up.
Mm-hmm.
Now here's the reality. Almost every dream takes time and money. You got to have some extra money to make it happen, or you got to have extra time to make it happen.
Yeah.
So the reality is the better you do every single day in your core job, the quicker you're going to get your dream.
Yeah. And I'll ask an interesting question. It's an interesting question because I've never shared this before in a podcast, but when I graduated college, I had a job. I was laid off from that job because I was, and I quote, too efficient. I had one other job after that, and it was the last job that I ever had, working for someone else, and I was fired because I was too efficient. Same exact reason. And you talk about the bicycle and the sites, and it's perfect because we had the company vision or the company goals and then my goals. And my goals, when I figured out, that the pay was different than was promised, I was like, well, I'll just work really, really hard and be, valuable to the company. And then they'll give me value back in the form of a raise. And it ended up that they said, oh, wow, you can do this 40-hour job in 20 hours. Well, you don't need to work here for 40 hours and you don't need health insurance either. And, so what happens when someone's working for someone else and they have that engagement, but the company doesn't return the value? How do they see that and what do they do?
The reality is, and this is Dad's childhood. Dad grew up in Yazoo City, Mississippi. He worked in a grocery store from the time he was, I think, 9 years old. And there was a kid.
That's not legal.
You know what? He started selling peanuts on the corner when he was 6. The greatest generation, the generation Dad was in, they all did that.
Yep.
Right? And how did they turn out? They didn't get called the greatest generation for nothing.
Yep.
Right? So Dad was in the grocery store one day, and this kid named Charlie Scott, he worked at another grocery store just around the corner. And back in those days, they didn't have a lot of money. There wasn't a lot of extra inventory. And so a regular customer might go to their regular grocery store, and if they needed something and that store was out, they were all friends. So they would go borrow inventory from the other store. So Charlie Scott was the runner. So he runs from the other store. He comes into Dad's store. The owner of that store that Dad worked was Mr. Anderson. He said, Mr. Anderson, I need 2 cans of green beans. And Mr. Anderson said, Charlie, you know where they are. Just go grab them and mark them off. So Charlie ran back there, dead run, grabs the cans, checks it off on the little sheet, the borrow sheet, runs
Yeah.
out. Dad asked Mr. Anderson, he says, how come Charlie's always running? And Mr. Anderson said, well, he's working for a raise and he's going to get it too. And my dad looked at him and said, Mr. Anderson, how do you know he's going to get a raise? And Mr. Anderson said, well, if his boss doesn't give him a raise, I will.
I love that. And
so the number one boss that you have is that person you look in the mirror every morning and every night.
Yep.
Right? That's the one you got to make happy.
Yeah.
That's the one that's got to get that good night's sleep. If you work like crazy with the right attitude, yeah, you might get unlucky. You might work in a few places where they don't really appreciate or recognize that. But chances are, if you deal with customers and people from the outside, they'll recognize it.
Yeah.
And they'll make you that offer. Or if you go and start your own business, then you have the tools and that you need to make it happen.
Absolutely. And that's so important is starting, I think in every single podcast, and you just reiterated it, is everyone who's seen success, they always say that in order to build success, especially in multi-level marketing, you need to start from within. And if you don't, you'll never last and you won't see success because of the lack of longevity, but also because you're not doing the right things.
Right.
So I think that's actually a really decent segue into Born to Win. I mean, you co-wrote Born to Win with your dad right shortly before he passed away, and the principles in it are awesome. But tell me more about the message that you share there.
Born to Win, the first three major sections of it, and this is all Dad's, we basically took his 50 years of, being in the public and speaking and research, and we put all this philosophy into one book. And it's based on a quote that says, you are born to win, but in order to be the winner you were born to be, you must plan to win, prepare to win, and then and only then can you expect to win. So it's real simple. Plan, prepare, expect.
Yep.
And our culture is a have now culture. All the commercials on TV are 30 or 60 seconds and, problem solution. We want to have it now, have it now, have it now. And the reality is it's just like football or any other sport. You got a game plan, what you're going to accomplish, what you're going to do. You understand where your strengths are, where you might need some support, what the opponent's strengths are, where their weaknesses are. So you plan it out. And then you prepare, which means you practice over and over and over again. And then once you do those two things, then when you go out on the field, you can expect to win. And life is the same way. Whatever goal we want to have, who we want to become, what do we want to achieve, we got to do that same thing. Look out into the future. Who do we want to be in a year, 5 years from now? Okay, what attributes, what skills, what qualities do we need to have within ourselves to become that person? That's the planning. The preparing is doing it. It's working on it. It's spending 30 minutes a day at Automobile University.
Yeah.
It's reading good books. It's listening to podcasts like this. And then, yeah, absolutely. And then putting it in practice, actually doing it.
Well, and you wrote the last half of the book.
Start to expect to win.
You wrote the last half of the book that talks about putting it into practice. And how, so a lot of people, they'll go to like a seminar and they'll hear an amazing speaker like you or your dad, and you'll just, be 100% engaged and charged up, sitting in the audience like, oh my, this is amazing. But so many people will leave and never implement. And so that's why a lot of speakers, and I think you would echo the same thing, is that there has to be an action. And, buy the book, do the training program or something, because almost like not selling something or not giving that action step at the end of a speaking, so many people will just leave and kind of forget everything.
Right.
So the last half of the book is the action step, and you wrote that. So tell me a little bit more about how you tied that in and tied, the idea of it in building to actually taking action.
Well, we actually, and this is kind of a personal thing, for like 7-8 years, I would think about, because like I said earlier, I'm kind of a nerd. I live in my head. I've been to the best seminars the world has ever had to offer.
Yeah.
Right. Not only do I get to hear my dad and our other presenters, but he's been on the stage with the best that ever was. Yeah. And I got to hear them speak too. And I was the guy that took the notes, right? Yeah. And then I didn't go and do anything for most of them, right? I look back at my yellow pad 6 months later, nothing. I hadn't done anything. So I asked myself the question, well, what is it that Dad would do that would get people to take action. Because we get thousands of testimonials.
Yeah.
I mean, tens of thousands, literally, that other people don't do. And I came up with his system. He didn't even know he had it. So there's 5 points to this. But it was intrinsic to all of his talks. And here it is. And everybody who's trying to influence somebody else to success, whether it's one-on-one or in a group presentation, here's the backbone of it. Hope, identity, will, skill, and refill. That's it. So let me break it down. The first thing he would do is create hope. So what is hope? So Dad would ask this question. He would say, how many of you believe there's something you can do in your personal, your family, your business life in the next week that would make things worse? You know, it's like, man, I don't care who you are. You cut the end of your nose off, things are worse, right? We can all do that.
Yeah.
Then he'd flip it and he'd say, okay, how many of you believe there's something you can do in your personal, family, or business lives in the next week that make things better?
Yep.
Everybody raised their hand. And then he would say, whether you realize it or not, you just admitted to yourself, you have the power to make things better or worse, and the choice is yours. And that's where hope is born. See, hopeless people don't take action.
Yeah.
So any type of presentation that is inspiring, that's great, but it's got to give hope as well. Yep. Hope means that there's going to be fruit after taking action. And then there's identity.
Well, go back to hope for a second, just because I want to point this out, is I always laugh, and I don't watch many, but like disaster movies or anything where the world is ending, any kind of movie where the world is ending, there's always going to be the majority of people who start screaming and running, but then the protagonist of the story is the one that has a plan and that is going somewhere, and that the movie ends and they're still alive.
Right.
So I always kind of laugh at that, because it's like life, you know? The people who don't have hope and think that they're hopeless are the ones that will die you know, because of the comet or whatever, depending on the movie. Zombies.
Yep. I'm a big fan of zombies. Yep. Yeah, zombies don't care because they have no dreams.
No.
So you got to have a dream. So here you go. So once you get the hope thing, then Dad would do identity. And I didn't understand this. This was a relatively new revelation for me. I read a book called The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. And what he did is he studied champions. And he studied what made them a champion. Right? Because there's people who are at the top of their game, whether they're in sports or music or business or whatever. And one of the key components was this concept of identity. He did a study on the last 10 world record holders of the 100-meter race. And what he discovered was that 9 of the 10 came from very large families, like 7 kids, 6 kids, 8 kids.
Yeah.
And they were almost always the last born or second to last born child.
Huh.
So what a perfect study, right?
Right.
So
right.
First he said, has anybody else in the family got world-class speed? And none of them did.
Yeah.
So immediately he knew it wasn't genetics or environment that made them fast. And what he discovered in the brain development, when you're a baby growing up, there's a period in brain development where you look at your older brothers and sisters who are basically carbon copies of you, just bigger.
Right.
And your brain thinks they're fast, I must be fast.
Yep.
Your brain doesn't have the maturity to know that they're fast because they're bigger or older, right?
Right.
So that was one. The second study he did was in a classroom. They did this experiment where the teacher in a calculus class taught a branch of calculus, and he would teach the class this way. He'd say, class, today we're going to cover this branch of calculus. It was discovered and created by John Browning, Edinburgh, Scotland, 1850. Then he would teach them how to do the equations. And then there'd be a test at the end. And on the test, they would have one test that would go to this half of the class, yep, and one test that would go to this half of the class. Same exact test, except for in the middle of it, there was a bio of John Browning. And it would tell about his life. And at the bottom, it had his birthday really big. So one half of the class, the birthday would actually be the birthday of the student who got it. So Brian, if I gave you the test, you'd look down and you go, hey, he was born on the same day as me. right? So the teacher had prepared these tests each to each person.
Yep.
The other half, the birthday was random.
Mm.
They filmed the class. The students with the same birthday worked on the problems 30% longer
Wow.
because they identified with it.
Yeah.
So my belief that dad's power and your power as a leader is your number one attribute are the personal struggles that you've been through. You see, people would hear dad and they'd go, I could never be Zig Ziglar. I mean, look at him. He's smart. He's funny. He's a great speaker. He's got all this research. He's got money. He hangs out with the cool people. All right. And then they hear that his dad died when he was 5. He went to work when he was 6, selling peanuts on the corner. It was the middle of the Great Depression. He was raised by a single mom with a 5th grade education. He was the 10th of 12 kids. He never did well in school. He got his first sales job. He didn't sell anything for 2.5 years. So what happens is people start thinking, if he can, I can.
Yep.
So whatever struggles we've been through in life, whether it's a health issue, a relationship or a divorce, maybe we went bankrupt, maybe we've tried 5 things and none of them worked, and then we finally figure it out. If you want to have an impact on people, is instead of preaching to them, you put your arm around them and you say, boy, I understand a little bit about what you're going through. Let me tell you about what I went through.
Yeah.
Right? And then they think, well, hey, if he could, if she could, maybe I can. And to me, that means that they try your advice 30% longer.
Yeah, which is a very different message than I'm struggling with ABC, and then you respond back, well, I did XYZ, and that's 10,000 times harder, and you're struggling with ABC. You know, it's a completely different message
Right.
of like a direct versus a, you know, let's do this together. It's a very, yeah, it's a completely different message, and all it is phraseology.
Right. So they say they're struggling with ABC. You tell them, man, let me tell you about the time I cratered on X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Right? I was at the bottom. I lost all this money. My friends left me. I had to start over. But you know what? I remembered these 3 things.
Yeah.
Let me show you these 3 things. And that's why I'm here today. It's not because I'm something, you know, I'm not God's gift to mankind. It's just I took these principles and kept going. Let me help you keep going. So you give them hope. Once they identify with you that, hey, wait a second, you're real, you've had challenges, you've overcome them. You're not some, you know, big shot. You're somebody who's overcoming life just like they are.
Right.
But you figured out some principles. And then finish it off with will, skill, and refill. Will is the heart, the attitude, the desire, the want to, the passion. So Dad said, we got to work on that every single day. That's our attitude. Skill is the how-to, the process, the technique. Man, we got to sharpen our knife. You know, we got to sharpen the saw, our axe. We got to get technically better at whatever we do. So if we have hope, if we identify to where we do things 30% longer, and we're working on our attitude and our skills every single day, and then refill means repeat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the system. So that was his message basically every time he talked. Hey, there's hope. And guess what? It's hard, but if you have these principles, you can have some of the success like I did. It's going to be different for you. But hey, if I can do it, you can do it. You just got to work on your attitude and your passion and your desire, and then your skill and your technique and your process. You do that every day, it's going to happen.
Yeah, and that boiling it down into those steps is huge because it's accessible to people. I think that a lot of people, in a variety of ways, think, I mean, you know, yes, they see Zig on stage speaking and they go, this is amazing, but that's Zig. But at the same time, you know, when he says that you do this, this, and this, it seems very simple, but almost too simple. And people have to be able to connect with it and say, I can do that. You know, that will make a difference and I'm going to work towards it.
Right.
So, you know, beyond the book, you talk a lot about taking responsibility and helping people to take responsibility for their own future. You know, so often people are the ones that are coasting kind of at work, and they, I think there was something said between the difference of people in the United States versus people in the United Kingdom, is that it's live to work versus work to live.
Right.
And people just kind of have a different mentality, is that they only want to make, in the United States, they only want to make money so that they can survive, versus it's the opposite in many other countries. How do you help people connect with that when they don't, they're in that coasting mentality of, oh, well, everything's just kind of good. And I mean, it's basically corporate survival, let's say.
Yeah. To me, it's the why behind the why behind the why behind the why. Behind the why behind the why behind the why. I mean, right? So let's say you're coming in and I see somebody who's kind of flat, they're coasting.
Yep.
Like, what's the point? What's your dream? Some people won't even open up and share their dream. I mean, it takes a while. And so what happens is in that situation is you've got to build a relationship based on trust, right? Seth Godin said that we live in the connection economy, right? It's the internet, it's Facebook, it's social media. There's too much information. We're totally connected. So in the connection economy, the number one commodity is trust. So everything we do or don't do, everything we say or don't say is either building or eroding trust. So if I'm building a relationship with you, it's got to be based on trust, and trust is a byproduct of integrity.
Yeah, I like that.
Right? Trust is simply a byproduct of integrity. So here's the deal. Let's say somebody's flat, they're unmotivated, they don't see the point. If I'm going to breathe life into them, I'm going to have to build a relationship to where they'll accept some things. And they may be totally closed off. Most people aren't, but some people are kind of on that edge, right? They're like speaking to a rock. But over time, they'll see that you're consistent, that you have this integrity, that what you say, you follow up on. And then you get them to open up. Hey, man, what's your dream? Well, I don't know. Well, where would you like to be a year from now? I don't know. Well, do you want to go on vacation this year? Well, yeah. Well, where would you want to go? Well, I don't know. Well, if you could go anywhere, where would it be?
Yeah.
And so they say, oh, I want to go to Cancun for 4 days. Well, why don't you go to Cancun for 4 days? So there's got to be a dream. And for some people, it might be hard to think, I want to retire rich and fund this nonprofit and do all this stuff. They got to have that little one first.
Right.
Okay, so you want to go to Cancun. How much does that cost? I don't know. Well, let's think about it for a minute. How much does it cost? Well, airline ticket from New York, $500 a person, $150 a night, 2-room, da-da-da-da. I think for about $2,500, I could go to Cancun. Well, when do you want to go? 6 months from now. Okay, well, guess what? We need to make about $400 or $500 a month in savings to get you to Cancun, right? So now they're out in life, and somebody says, you should call so-and-so. They might be interested. Well, I don't want to. I don't feel like it. Well, but what would happen if you did? Well, then they might sign up. Well, what would happen if they signed up? Well, then I'd get more money. And then if I got more money, what would happen? Well, then I could pay my bills. And what if you paid all your bills and you had some left over? What would you do? Oh, wait, I could go to Cancun. And so there's got to be a compelling why that draws us to something. So notice how the relationship is first built on trust, right? Connection. And then a little dreaming. And then if I'm the leader, I'm helping them get there. I'm not giving them the $2,500.
Right.
I'm giving them the game plan or the things they need to know.
You're giving them the connection between the two.
Right, exactly.
And I think that's huge because, when when someone in multi-level marketing is talking to a prospect, that's one thing. But once someone joins a team, assuming they're joining to work towards those dreams, if they can't make that connection, then they won't do the work, they won't see the success. And I think that a lot of times, math is really important, right? Do the research and see if that's actually the case, or, how much a Ferrari actually costs and what you need to do over the next 15, 20 years in order to get one. But having that connection to be able to work towards it, and then having the relationship with your team so that they believe you when you say that it's possible.
Yep.
And I think one of my other favorite quotes, I wrote it down just to make sure that it was mentioned, is another one that your dad said is, your attitude, not your aptitude, will determine your altitude.
Yeah.
And I think that fits in perfectly because, when you're working with someone else as this, you got sponsored by someone, if your upline is sitting there and working with you and helping to make those connections, it's exponentially more powerful in uplifting you and helping you to see that it's possible. So that leads me to legacy, and you are the legacy of your father. He created you, and you go out and you help people on a regular basis. You're writing, you're speaking, you're inspiring people. But he, in the work that he did in his lifetime, something that other people can do and something that you're doing currently, is helping to give people that kind of responsibility for the future and build up. And people like Seth Godin, Dave Ramsey, Les Brown, Brian Tracy, and so many more people have attributed Zig's work in some way to their career. I mean, these huge people that are going out and helping other people. How is, I guess, what's the significance of building a legacy in your opinion?
Yeah. I came up with a definition of legacy. Legacy is the sum total impact of all of the people who have been impacted and who continue to impact others through your influence. Yeah. So if you are impacting, let's look at Seth Godin. He's an incredible human being. He does so much good work. I mean, he's like a genius in so many different levels. And early in his career, and he'll tell you, because we've got it on video testimonial, he'll tell you that it was listening to Dad every single day when he was in the thick of it that kept him going, right? It helped him power through it. And I heard him on a podcast one time with John Maxwell say, hey, if Zig ever needs somebody to fill in for him, I can do it. I know his stuff word for word, right? So legacy is not just Dad's direct impact on people, but it's those people's impact with that same philosophy on everybody else. So this podcast and what you do and quoting Dad and those things, you're part of the legacy. So I felt nervous about saying, oh no, Tom's got the legacy. No, I don't. I can't screw that up. Right? That's already handled. He's done that. Yeah. So my mission is to extend that legacy, to go one step further. My joy is not only giving people the information they need to become all they can be, do, and have, but it's going one step further. It's equipping them to help others do the same thing. That's why we created our newest thing, which is called our Ziglar Legacy Certification Program, where we actually certify speakers, trainers, coaches, and consultants to train some of our material, because it's the living out of that legacy process.
Yeah. And being able to formalize that makes it much more powerful, so that people can make sure that the quality of it continues and that the power behind that quality continues to grow within everybody. And it just, it tiers out. It's kind of like a pyramid. And, it starts with Zig, it goes to all these amazing people, yourself included, and then it keeps going and going and going, and people have their lives changed from something that happened decades ago and that they never had a direct connection to. So wrapping it up, and I have one question for you. It's an action question, so that anyone who's listening can take action today. And it's based on a quote, again, from your dad, is expect the best, prepare for the worst, and capitalize on what comes. How can someone have a mindset to prepare for that and that enables them to do that?
Well, here's another quote that he had. A positive attitude will always help you do better than a negative attitude will. So there is no benefit to a negative attitude. Yep. Okay? So here's what Dad did, and I'll use his travel example. He flew all the time, right? And when you fly a lot, you're going to get plane delays and cancellations. Yep. And so he knew that was a possibility before he even left on the trip. So when he'd get to the airport and the gate agent would say, got bad news, we're delayed 4 hours, Dad would look at him and say, fantastic. And they'd think he was crazy, but I saw him do it. And they'd ask, why are you doing that? And he'd say, well, there's only 3 reasons a plane won't take off. The equipment's broken, there's something wrong with the flight crew, or the weather's bad. Yep. Right? So if any of those 3 things are going on, I don't want to be on the plane. That's good news.
Yeah.
And number 2, I've got my books, I've got my things to write my information with. Yep. There's an office right here that's thousands of square feet. You've got restaurants that will serve me 24/7. There's hot coffee. I'm prepared to move on with life. Yep. And so he never stressed or worried about anything he couldn't control. Zero. And he was always prepared. Yeah. And so issues and things are going to come up where the people are going to say no, we're going to get rejected, the plane's going to be delayed. Yeah. So what? That's life. what we have control over is what we can do next, what we can do about it. And he was always ready for it. You couldn't give him bad news that he didn't have a positive response to.
That's awesome. Sounds like a challenge too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I'm gonna have links below to everything that we talked about, as well as probably some of the quotes, and I'll have some designs made up, I think, to make some really great images of these quotes that you said as well as that Zig said. And thank you so much again for sharing your insights on the podcast, and look forward to having you on again soon.
All right. Thank you so much. It was great being here, Brian.